The fears of military leaders appear to recede as they celebrate Armed Forces Day despite the change of power. Economic reforms. The government liquidates the sources of social tension. Azerbaijan responds to the declaration by Marshal Shapechnikov and Ms. Starovoitova on the Karabakh crisis. The diagnosis of Honecker gradually assuages the Germans. Good evening. The current celebration of February 23rd is not deviating in any way from earlier traditions. As before, no one is using the word party. Today, the Russian president was with the military personnel but did not give a speech. He came together with all the top Russian leaders who are in Moscow. Everything was done so that the military will not feel insulted or ignored. This session was preceded by long discussions in the parliament, the mass media, and the public. Do we need a unified armed force in the Commonwealth, or a unified command of strategic nuclear weapons? The politicians seem to have concluded that we do need them, but what will happen in half a year or 1 year? A year from now, Armed Forces Day will have its own name in each of the countries of the CIS. In Moscow, it already is called Day of Defenders of the Fatherland. The Moscow Mayor's Office, along with the Commander for Relations with the personnel of the Unified Force of the CIS, and the Moscow Military District were the initiators of this holiday. Our history confirms that as long as there is an army, then there will be Russia. The army is an essential feature of Russian statehood. Therefore, no programs of reform in Russia can be implemented or successful if we do not effectively solve the issue of the army. But the army in Russia is not only an element of statehood, it's the life and fate of tens of millions of people. I want to note that the majority of the countries of the Commonwealth at the meeting in Minsk signed an agreement on unified armed forces. On the eve of our professional holiday, the President of the Russian Federation issued an order on social protection of military personnel. We are not throwing up our hands. We are seeking and successfully finding paths toward the civilized solution of our problems. For the first time in the recent months, Boris Yeltsin, Alexander Rudskoy, and Mikhail Gorbachev were in the hall together. They considered it their duty to be here today. They know that the army can not only fight, but can unite people with very diverse views. Last year on February 23rd was a Saturday, and thousands of military personnel met on Manege Square by order of their political leaders. Today there will be a demonstration this year, but not on Manege Square, in 5 different places to keep apart the Democrats and Patriots, the Reds and the Whites. On the eve of meetings of the government is attempting to resolve the arising centers of social tension. Polar Vorkuta is often a catalyst of social tension in Russia. The miners are not striking this time. It's the teachers of 30 schools and 5 kindergartens. The government has tried to solve these social ills so far by injections of money, but Russian State Secretary Gennady Burbulis and the members of his delegation are trying to remove social conflicts by using economic liberties. This was the topic of a meeting today between Gennady Burbulis and the members of the Coordinating Commission of the Strike Committees of Teachers and Healthcare Workers on the Central Collective Farm and the Vorkuta mine. The reaction to the increasing tension in the country because of the release of prices today became the decree by the Russian president creating a special commission regulating social and labor relations. At the special session of the government, the 3 sides, the government, unions, and entrepreneurs, considered a draft agreement on joint activity this year. The measures proposed include supporting the needy elements of the population, regulating retail prices on basic food items, creating a social fund to help children and adolescents, and employment programs and others. The Vice Premier Alexander Shokin reported that the Russian Supreme Soviet has been given a proposal to make additional pension payments in the amount of 200 rubles. Nevertheless, the signing of this agreement has been postponed until February 28th. Psychologically, we've come through the first stage of reform. Yeltsin gave the results of this first stage on television recently, and Gaidar at the session of the government. Gaidar has reason for self-satisfaction. Money has not yet made the links in the market chain work. Production is still falling, but the ruble is gaining strength. Consumers are finally resolving their issues. As they reach the end of their financial resources, they are harshly punishing monopolists by refusing to buy their products, which forces monopolists to reduce their prices. Our consumers are like a curious patient who looks behind and see how the injection is given. The long chocolate lines have disappeared. Strikers are now demanding not trivial salary increases, but economic freedoms. But there are many pessimistic predictions, nevertheless. The most gloomy predictions are made by politicians and economists who are not in power. The characteristic of today's life is that the trust in the government has become the main political category, and economic category as well, because there is no success yet, only a feeling of the success of economic reform. If panic causes everyone to lose faith in the ruble and buy dollars instead, then the ruble stabilization fund will not be enough. Even the threat of a change in the reform course by the parliament is enough to make us lose faith, and this will endanger our help from the West. The Russian government is trying to avoid lack of confidence, even more than it's avoiding tax revenue shortfalls. Russian industry minister Alexander Titkin and the governor of Sakhalin Island, Valery Fyodorov, are convinced that in order to develop the Sakhalin shelf, Western companies should be hired only as subcontractors to use their know-how. The minister has just concluded a trip to the islands, and we asked him why he took the trip. The trip was made necessary by my natural desire and the essential importance, the necessity of finding opportunities to make use of our military-industrial complex enterprises, which are becoming unemployed because of military conversion. Sakhalin Island is a far-off place, but it is also a place of common Russian interests. We are happy that that we are finally getting constructive and effective support from Moscow. I appeal to all directors of enterprises, don't wait for manna from heaven. In the country's budget there is no money, but there is a mass of money in the country. Learn how to organize this money. Become entrepreneurs, and in this way you will save the country. So the enterprises of the military-industrial complex are intending to participate actively in the development of the Sakhalin shelf, and they will do it using their own resources. Today in Moscow there was a meeting of kindergarten workers. They are worried that in today's conditions, parents will give their children to their grandmothers rather to kindergartners, which will, as a result, not be able to survive. As we know, the famous Governess Mary Poppins appeared after an advertisement in the newspaper reading, "We need the best nanny for the lowest price." Today in our country we have a great demand for inexpensive nannies. Today this meeting was organized by the Labor Party. There were reports that every family will have to pay 1,000 rubles a month for childcare. This is not quite true. If we remove emotion from the facts, we hear from one of the authors of the legislation. The maximum expense from parents, including all of their transfer payments, will be no more than 100 to 150 rubles. Of course, 100 rubles is much better for kindergarten care than 1,000 rubles. But for a person of average income, this once again forces us to abandon the dream for mercy of government. Heads of families, please open the Mary Poppins again. Choose either a nice new home or 4 children. We can't have both. 1 half hour before we came on the air, we made contact with our correspondent in Karabakh, Mikhail Zotov. He reports that this morning, Stepanakert was fired upon by 30 rocket shells from the direction of Shusha. At 5:05 p.m. Moscow time, a second volley began, which brought significant destruction to the city. At 6:45, 35 rocket shells destroyed many housing sectors in the city. The city is burning, and rescue work is hampered by a lack of electric power, fuel, and water. Today it was possible to bring out of Nagorno-Karabakh those military personnel who were wounded on February 19th when the 366th Infantry Company came under fire. At the same time, the Armenian president is in Moscow and is avoiding the press. According to some reports, he was to meet with President Yeltsin and Marshal Shaposhnikov today. We have no confirmation that these meetings occurred. The press secretary of President Mutaliyeva found it necessary today to react to the declaration of Shaposhnikov and Starovoytova on the peacekeeping role by third countries in Nagorno-Karabakh. In terms of the strategic forces of Azerbaijan, we are prepared to have